The next topic I want to talk about is running form and how to run efficiently. There's no real perfect form. Everybody's body's a little different. Everybody has different experiences. Everybody moves differently. But there are some things we can learn. And as far as running form, if you've ever heard of Usain Bolt, I think he still is the world's fastest sprinter. And if you really analyze him, people have noticed that he's a little bit lopsided. He probably has a little bit tightness in his hips, but no one's about to tell him to try to change anything because he's already at the top of his game and it probably would make him worse. So you don't have to be perfect, but there are some guidelines that you can follow that will help you get better. One thing is, before you really start running, before you can run in good form, there's 3 steps. You have to have proper mobility in the right places. You have to have the proper actual movement patterns. And finally, you have to have the strength. But there's no point in trying to run harder, faster, longer if you don't have the first 2 issues down. So first, I'm going to talk about mobility. People talk about tight hamstrings when they run. And honestly, tight hamstrings are not an issue unless you hurt your hamstring. They're not an issue for a runner. But typically what happens are the hip flexors in the front get tight and they pull you this way, and that pulls on your hamstring. But you only need enough mobility to be able to do the things you want to do in good form. So for running, there's a book called Anatomy for Runners by Jay Deshary that's really, really good book. And he explains how he's a physical therapist, and you only really need mobility in 3 different places to be able to run: your big toe, your ankle or calf, and then your hip flexors. So your big toe, if you can't fully roll through on your big toe, if that toe won't bend, you're going to have to go off to the side or wobble, and that's going to cause problems with your knee and hip and low back. So you want to be able to bend your big toe back at least 45 degrees. If you can get 45, most people or lots of people can go up to 90 degrees, but as long as you have 45 degrees, that's good enough to run and walk properly. The second place you need mobility is in your ankle, or your calf can't be too tight. So if you try to hold your arch up and keep your foot in good position, as you bring your knee forward, you should be able to get your leg at a 45-degree angle, or at least a 30-degree angle. And a guideline is, can your knee go past the center of your foot? The way my knee is now ahead of my toes, that means that I have enough flexibility in my calf. And again, if you don't, I work on lots of people that have 90-degree angle. It won't roll at all, and they have to do really weird things and get figure 8s going. It's really hard on your body to be if you don't have that mobility. Then the third thing you need the mobility in is in your hip flexor, and I'm going to kneel down here. But if you're kneeling, if you put a broomstick across up and down your back, or if you're in on a door jamb, if you can pull your belly button in and hold your back as flat as you can against the stick or the door jamb, you should be able to lean forward and hold that flat, or get your leg back if it's against the door jamb. If your leg can come back, if your knee can come back while your back is still against the wall of the door jamb, then you have good good flexibility in your hip flexors. But if you're here like this, and if you're trying to go forward and you're having to arch your back and you're just touching with your butt and your shoulders, that means this is too tight and pulling. So if you have adequate flexibility, you're set to run, and you probably never have to worry about it again because you'll stay flexible just from your running. But if you don't, you really need to work on it. You can bend your toe back. You can do lunges or against the wall to stretch your calf to get more ankle mobility. When you do that, there's 2 muscles in there. One stretches better when you have your knee bent, and the other one stretches better when you have your knee straight. So you want to do both of those stretches. Whichever one doesn't move, then that's the one you need to work on. For a hip flexor stretch, you can just do a lunge. And the way I do it is I lean forward, I put my hand on my back to make sure my low back stays flat, and I try to come down with my knee a little bit and then try to come up with my body, but don't let your low back bend. So really tighten your core and just feel a stretch in the front of your leg. And once you have that stretch, you can turn and move different ways. You can do it kneeling down. But the hip flexor is the most common tight thing that messes up people's running form that I've seen. The next part is movement patterns and how you hold your body. So whether this works, whether you're sitting at a desk, running, walking, whatever you're doing, you want to keep your spine as straight as you can. And I call it the 1, 2, 3 posture thing. But if you think about a string on the top of your head, you've probably heard this in yoga classes, pulling upward, but you kind of want your neck not to be out like this, like when we're on the computer, but you want to bring your head backward, but you don't want to tip your head up or down. So you want to keep your eyes level and bring your chin in and try to flatten the part of your neck. So that's number one. For the thoracic spine, the upper back, if you do your shoulders, some shoulder rolls, and try to pull your shoulder blades down toward your heels, the tips of your shoulder blades, and just tension that a little bit. It's using your lat muscles to pull down. That'll flatten out your back. We tend to be this way, and you're not going to run well this way. And if this is curved, then this will be curved, and your head will be out. So by rolling your shoulders back and holding them down, that straightens out the middle. And then for the low back, if you think about just bringing your belly button in toward your spine, that tends to flatten your low back. You can also put your fingers right here on the outside of your abs. It's called the transverse abdominis. If you blow out like you'll feel that muscle tighten. That's what you want to tighten up. You're not trying to hold it with your six-pack muscle like doing a sit-up, but it's just sort of compressing all the air and tightening your core, trying to squeeze everything in. When you do that, that flattens your low back. But some people will sometimes overdo it and try to go like tucking their tail under. You don't want your tail tucked under like a scared dog. No matter what you're doing, you want to feel like you could wag your butt. You could wag your tail like a happy dog. So it's the neck, the shoulders, the low back. So then you're in good posture and you're ready to run. So when you run, the most important thing you can do is try to get your cadence up. Cadence is steps per minute, and little kids, top marathoners, top sprinters, or brand new adult runners, they tend to run at 180 steps per minute. And that's basically 3 steps a second, like 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. If you're going that fast, running like this, you're going to be in better form than if you're going. A lot of people will kind of like jump, splat. And when I time people, your average recreational runner and even some top marathon runner people, not elite people, but people that run a lot of marathons really fast, they're just jumping way out. They're slamming into the ground. When you go they'll be at 160 steps per minute. When you do that, your foot is slamming your heel first. That causes a shock wave that hurts your knee, your hip, your low back, and then it wastes energy, and all that energy is splatting into the ground like throwing a sack of rice on the ground. Then they have to use energy to jump and do it again. If instead you go at 180 steps per minute, what happens is your center of gravity when your foot lands is right over your foot, so you don't waste you're not hitting here and braking and having to come up and over, but your foot's right here. So if you're running like this, it's kind of like the same cadence as jumping rope. If you jump rope, you'll jump around 180 jumps per minute, which is very bouncy. All the ligaments and tendons in your body, everything's lined up, and it's more like a pogo stick instead of like throwing the bag of rice and then picking it up and throwing it again. So that'll reduce injury. It'll make you more efficient. It'll keep you in your happy zone. And it's also something they've shown you can do. When you do that, you also tend to shorten your step, and you tend to land more on your forefoot, so your foot can help absorb the shock. But if you tell people, run on your forefoot or try to shorten your step, Every coaching study they've done, people just get worse. But when you tell them, here's a song, run in time with this song, or you can get a metronome. Any phone, you can get a metronome app, and you can just turn that on every now and then and just practice. A couple tricks to get good form also is if you run fast, but in your happy zone, comfortable, the faster you run, the chances are you're going to do what I just said without even thinking about it. The other thing you can do is take off your shoes and run barefoot down a sidewalk, or there's a running track here in the rec center. When you run barefoot, if you run improperly, it hurts to slam your heel into the ground, and you'll stop doing it immediately. So I'm not saying people should just be running everywhere barefoot, but just as a training mechanism, you go out and you run barefoot a little bit every now and then, at least for a few minutes till you feel how it feels, and then try to remember how that feels and run that way normally. Again, I can't stress enough that you should stay in your happy zone. If you're breathing hard, you're not running properly, and you're also going to lose your motivation, and unless you have a really strong will, you're just going to give up, and you're not going to continue to run. I once did a class here at the rec center, and I told everybody how to run properly, and then we went out and I did high-speed video or slow-mo video of them running, and I was expecting everyone to run improperly, but most of the class was brand new to running, and all the new people, they were running perfectly. And the people that were runners that came to the class, it turned out they were doing the 160 steps per minute, they're jumping and splatting, and their form was bad. And it made me realize that I think the reason people run in bad form is because they just feel like they should be able to go farther, to do better, to go faster, to keep up with everybody else. And they get into this plotting mode. And if you're just trying to grit your teeth and survive that 160 steps per minute jump, splat, that kind of makes sense. That's a natural thing that our body can do, but it's just not going to make it fun, and it's not going to be the easiest on you, and you're probably not going to stick with it. And also running, if you're tired and you're not in good enough shape, what's the point of trying to run? Just walk until you feel good again. And then when you start running, you'll run happy and faster again for a while. But you can't exceed your fitness level. And if you do, all you're going to do is hurt yourself and teach yourself bad habits. So as far as running form goes, the bottom line is just relax, try to be upright, try to run at 180 steps per minute, and be playful with it, and just try to run happy.